in-depth step-by-step guide to painting a realistic landscape without any color mixing. This technique relies on layering pure colors directly from your palette and using varied brush strokes to create depth and detail. Your painting's composition can serve as a great base for this approach. Materials needed: paints, assorted colors in tubes, primaries, earth tones, and some light shades. Brushes, flat brushes for large areas, round brushes for details, and fan brushes for texture. Palette knife, optional for texture effects. Canvas or watercolor paper, depending on the medium. Reference image, a realistic landscape. Step 1, prepare your sketch. Lightly sketch the main elements of your landscape. Horizon line, mark where the sky meets land. Mountains and hills, outline the mountain ranges, hills, and valleys. Foreground and middle ground, sketch the path, trees, flowers, and any figures you'd like to include. Step 2, painting the sky. 1. Sky base color. Start with a light blue straight from the tube. Use a flat brush and cover the sky area without blending. For natural light variation, leave some white spots on the canvas where clouds or lighter areas will go. 2. Clouds. Dab pure white with a round brush, applying it in small circular strokes for fluffy clouds. Use a dry brush to lightly blend only the edges and leaving the centers of the clouds crisp and bright. 3. Depth in the sky. To give the sky depth, layer darker blue or gray at the top for a gradient effect. Avoid blending. Instead, layer it on with horizontal strokes. Step 3. Painting the distant mountains. 1. Base colors. Use cool colors like light gray, blue, or violet directly from the tube. Paint the basic shape of the mountains, focusing on a slightly faded look for distance. 2. Shadows and highlights. Add depth by layering a dark blue or purple on the shadowed side of each peak, and use white or light blue for highlighted areas. Keep your brushstrokes separate. Layer colors without mixing. 3. Misty effect. For mist at the mountain base, use a very light gray or blue, applied softly with a dry brush. Step 4. Middle ground. Hills and trees. 1. Hills. Use greens straight from the tube. Dark green for shadows, brighter green for highlights. Layer the darker green for the base, and then add lighter greens or yellow-green where light hits. Tree shadows. Apply a dark green or brown under where trees and bushes will go. Use a dabbing motion with a fan brush for a textured look. Through tree highlights. Layer pure yellow-green on top of the trees to indicate sunlight. Use small dabbing strokes without blending to mimic leaf clusters. Step 5. Path and foreground details. 1. Path base color. Use a brown or reddish brown directly on the canvas. Apply it in sweeping horizontal strokes following the path's direction. 2. Path shadows and highlights. Layer a darker brown along the edges of the path and dab white or light brown in the center for a sunlit effect. Avoid blending. Use separate brush strokes. 3. Flowers and grassy texture. Use red, pink, or yellow straight from the tube to add flowers. Use a small round brush and apply quick, tiny dots or dabs for clusters. Grass. Use various shades of green applied in short, upward strokes to mimic grass blades. Layer darker greens underneath and brighter greens on top for highlights. Step 6. Add foreground details for realism. 1. Fine grass and rock details. Use a very fine brush to add thin grass blades with a light green. Then layer darker green beneath them for shadow. For rocks, use shades of gray and brown applied in sharp, distinct strokes. 2. Figures or small elements. Use black or dark colors to add people or animals. Paint their forms simply to keep them in the background. Step 7. Final touches for depth and texture. 1. Emphasize shadows. Go back with dark greens, browns, and even blues for deeper shadow areas. Layer these colors to increase contrast and make objects stand out. 2. Sunlit highlights. Add touches of pure yellow, white, or light green where sunlight hits surfaces. 3. Edge refinement. If any area looks too harsh, use a brush to lightly stipple more paint around the edge, rather than blending to soften transitions. Tips for success. Brush techniques. Experiment with stippling, dabbing, and layering to create texture without mixing. Layering over mixing. Always think in terms of layers. By using direct colors, you'll achieve more vibrant tones and stronger contrasts. Observe light and shadow. Pay close attention to light and shadow in your reference image. Layering pure colors effectively will help create a three-dimensional feel without the need for color mixing. By following these steps and focusing on layering rather than blending, you'll develop a landscape with rich, vibrant colors and realistic depth. Your painting will have a distinct, almost